this computer. I think we are recording. So I guess, yeah, we'll just get started. So, сегодня к нам присоединился доктор Дорджиева. Доктор Дорджиев исследует традиционную музыку калмыков и ойратов и преподавал в Санкт-Петербургском государственном университете по искусству и культуре, в Святой Петербургской консерватории и тоже в Гарвардском университете. То есть большое спасибо за ваше время, и мы можем начать. Да, по-первых,
Простите, можно я сразу поправлю? По поводу Гарвардского университета это было только summer school.
окей,
It's not, yeah, it's
да, окей.
big
Да,
difference.
да, спасибо. Да, окей, пожалуйста, расскажите о своем жизни, как была культура калмыков связана с вашим родителем и семьи, и тоже да.
Но это такой очень обширный вопрос. It's a very big question. Maybe more specific. What's your question? Let's make it more specific. Is it about language situation or
Yeah, so we
national
can, yeah, maybe about
identity?
language, overall, like what aspects of like the culture like were present in your everyday life. Was it like, for example, very traditional, or like more of like, what some like combination of modernized aspects and I guess more yeah, I guess like about growing up more than anything.
Should I talk mostly in English?
Either
Or
is
you?
fine. Either is fine. Yeah.
I prefer to talk about my own experience,
Mhm.
and let's say about my attitude to the language situation and how the situation with Kalmyk language, which already listed as endangered language, are there any positive hopes that it could be changed for better? Maybe that will be more up-to-date aspect of our topic. So I was born in Soviet time. At the time, Kalmykia was Советская автономная республика в составе России. И, насколько я помню, вся жизнь, она, в принципе, протекала только на русском языке. Потому что школьное образование все было на русском только. И, по сути дела, Калмыкия республика очень небольшая. Ну вот.
Упс. Только на русском языке. Okay. Sorry about that. I think we are back. It's mostly on my end. I've noticed that I have pretty unstable internet sometimes. So yeah, I heard until вы говорили только на русском языке, и калмыцком республика небольшая.
Да, и поскольку я выросла в городе особенно вся жизнь была ориентирована на русский язык. Ну, например, все обучение в школе было только по-русски. У нас было только несколько часов калмыцкого языка и литературы в школе, которые никто не любил, потому что в это время остальная часть класса, которые были не калмыки, они бегали на улице, у них был like break, and they enjoyed their time. And everyone who was sitting during the Kalmyk language lesson dreamed to escape the room. обучение, the studying of language was very formal. So as I remember, we just tried to read in Kalmyk, and you know that during the Soviet time, the classical Kalmyk script was replaced by Cyrillic Kalmyk, and the only thing we've learned just how to read in Kalmyk, but the content and all conversational skills or everyday life conversation, there were not of the interest at all. And I remember that every time I got excellent grade, only because I had good grades with all other subjects. So it was just automatically everyone got good grades without real evaluation how students understand and how they are they able to speak Kalmyk or not at all. And the only basic knowledge of Kalmyk I got with a conversation with my grandmother. In my family, my mother, she speaks Kalmyk as a native, but she didn't speak with us in the family. My stepfather didn't speak Kalmyk. And the only moments when I was in that Kalmyk language, in that environment, was my vacation with my grandmother. So only that very deep childhood remembrance is my basic for my Kalmyk. And then when I graduated from high school, no, not from grade school, high school, I was invited to St. Petersburg Music School. It was like boarding school. It was a system in the former Soviet Union to invite people from national minority to study at the music school and some other specialized schools. And I studied music theory and piano and later organ. And then when I entered St. Petersburg Conservatory, I was just typical theoretician with the interest to the Western European music. And I had no idea about Kalmyk traditional music at all. About traditional music, oral tradition overall, I had nothing. But then I had my first field work as a student of the conservatory. We had to go to the field work after our first year, and we were learned about Russian traditional music. And it was the expedition to the northern Russia, to Volогодskaya Oblast. And I had so deep impression when I first very first time I've heard traditional singers, and I was just amazed how beautiful that songs are. And it was a big surprise how that not educated people can sing by memory such a long and beautiful songs. And it was my first step when I realized that there is completely different oral culture, which is very ancient, with very meaningful content, and with very strong, how to better, something that allow them to survive for hundreds of years. And from that, I've decided that I would like to learn more about oral cultures, and then I started to learn Kalmyk culture, and I made my first field work, and then I've heard Kalmyk long songs, and that was the point when I decided that I would like to do that, and to be able to learn Kalmyk songs, I had to know more Kalmyk language. So since my first expedition, I started to learn Kalmyk language, and I continue to do it because it's very complicated language with very complicated grammar. And к своему стыду, я должна признать, что когда я ну, была студенткой очень престижного, э, престижной Санкт-Петербургской консерватории, где, казалось бы, учатся люди образованные. И я обнаружила, что большинство этих образованных музыкантов ничего не знают о традиционной культуре, потому что со времен Советского Союза было очень пренебрежительное отношение к устной традиции.
М,
А оказалось, что это совершенно неизвестная, очень сложная и очень э, важная часть культуры, которая практически была стерта из обихода. И это касается не только калмыцкой музыки, это касается и русской традиционной музыки, которую очень мало знали и до сих пор знают очень мало. Вот. И, то есть мой собственный опыт, он пришел из-за необходимости того, чтобы понимать тот материал, которым я хочу заниматься. So it was my very personal experience, how I realized that I need to know my own native language,
м,
and I'm doing that. Uh, as about situation in Kalmykia right now. So after deportation, when people started to come back to the Kalmyk Republic after 1957, 58, that generation who was born in Siberian exile, but in Kalmyk families, they still good speakers. They still almost full speakers of Kalmyk. But then all that generation who grew up in a Soviet republic, they one by one lost their ability to talk in Kalmyk. Then it was very strange and very odd situation. Maybe you met some situation with other minorities and other uh, cultures. In 1970s, 1980s, even 1990s, during all that time, it was very odd situation that people uh, didn't want to talk in Kalmyk because they were thinking that they are primitive, that to be more popular or more respectful, they should talk in Russian. And those people who spoke better, they were usually from the villages.
м,
Yeah, from that many по-русски это были поселки, колхозы и так далее.
мгм,
И они стеснялись говорить по-калмыцки, когда они приезжали в город. Они старались быстрее перейти на русский, потому что иначе им казалось, что они вот неграмотные, и что это даже это и смешно. Потому что если ты говоришь хорошо по-калмыцки, у тебя сильный акцент, ты не вполне правильно говоришь по-русски, все вокруг начинают над тобой смеяться. Вот.
м,
But very right now it's very interesting period of time when Kalmyk decided that they don't want to be Russian speakers. And it's actually it started before the war. This war intensifies that feeling, but the movement to come back to the Kalmyk language, it started, I guess, после перестройки.
м.
I'm sorry that I'm mixing up
No, no,
languages.
no, of course, no worries.
Да,
Okay.
вот это вот желание говорить по-калмыцки, оно начало формироваться в конце 1990-х годов.
Мгм,
И я хочу сказать, что сейчас в Элисте есть несколько энтузиастов, есть несколько центров, которые работают над тем, чтобы калмыцкий язык стал повседневным языком, чтобы создать новые курсы, которые позволяют людям естественно общаться на калмыцком языке не так, как это давалось в школьных учебниках, где был очень формальный, никому не нужный, неупотребляемые фразы калмыцкого языка. Вот. Это происходит, насколько Э, Насколько оно сейчас интенсивно в листе, мне сказать трудно. Но вот, например, я могу сказать о ситуации в калмыцко-американской диаспоре.
Мгм.
Потому что диаспора достаточно большая. Диаспора есть старая, которая образовалась еще после большой миграции, после Второй мировой войны. Но большой большая волна эмиграции происходила в последнее время, особенно в последний год, и она продолжается. И uh, younger generations of Kalmyks here in America, they would like to learn how to speak Kalmyk.
Mm.
And we, with my colleagues, we are doing the conversational Kalmyk English course. And I've met, I don't know, have you met about that Wikitang project, which supports many minority languages, endangered languages, and we have many like-minded people with whom we are contacting to share their experience and to share their uh, work, result of their work.
Мгм.
То есть, наверное, я бы сказала так, что ситуация совсем грустная с калмыцким языком, но есть очень сильная спонтанная потребность именно от молодых поколений э, учить свой язык. Вот что из этого будет, не знаю, но я просто вот на примере себя думаю, что если ты постоянно со своим языком, если на протяжении своей жизни ты а, его пытаешься развиваться в смысле своего языка, это уже какой-то, наверное, ну, шаг, ну, не назад, а хотя бы,
Мгм.
ну вот, как-то так, не знаю. Может быть, вам лучше задать какие-то более конкретные вопросы, иначе я, да, могу очень обобщенно слишком о чем-то говорить.
Да, no, so yeah, you do cover quite a lot of like a lot of my questions. I think about like how you started to be my second question was going to be how like did you become interested in the music of the region? So like you addressed that perfectly and kind of like you sort of hint at many of like the political situations and like how it sort of like has been evolving um over the youth. I do want to ask maybe a little bit about now. So now I'm like trying to combine a couple of my questions, but a сейчас какие политические проблемы существуют в регионе? And maybe like you can also tie this in with how maybe your professors over at the conservatory were like receptive towards you initially proposing, you know, focusing on the Kalmyk traditional music rather than like let's say the more Western I guess theory heavy music.
Uh, no, I was absolutely free in making
Okay.
my choice. The matter is that my teacher, my professor, he was very unusual person for academia. He was enthusiast who devoted his life to preserve and to research Russian traditional music. And because of his passion, he taught many people who became very passionate about oral cultures. And he just supported, and uh, we had no sources, we had no materials about Kalmyk long songs. So he knew a lot about that from my recordings, and we heard together, we were singing together about that uh, Kalmyk long songs, and he started to love it. And he had few favorite Kalmyk long songs, which he every time asked me to sing for him. And it's very interesting that many musicians from St. Petersburg Conservatory, they started to love Kalmyk music because in terms of musicality, it's just some of them absolutely perfect in terms of their form, melodic development, and very prominent St. Petersburg composer Sergei Slonimsky.
Mm.
He loved that Kalmyk songs, and my classmate, they love my recordings, and we even sang together that Kalmyk songs because they love it, because they're beautiful. And at that moment, it was some contradictionary that I had a huge support from my teacher and from my classmates, from my friends from conservatory, but I didn't had support from my family because
Mm.
they was thinking it's rubbish. Why you change your theme? It's very strange to record old people. Uh, they didn't understand the value of that music. And in Elite Star at that moment, also there was no interest to the long song because they are difficult. It's
Hmm.
difficult to understand words. It's difficult to catch the melody because it's sometimes very intricate and very complicated. And sometimes it's very difficult to learn or to repeat that melody. And it just psychologically, if you don't understand that text, you cannot, very often you can't like it because you don't understand what
Mm.
it's about. Yes, I may say it was very odd situation when Kalmyk, who were originally Kalmyks for younger generation, they didn't understand and didn't value and didn't like long songs because they cut from that culture. They just didn't understand that. I may say I may tell you about one example which was very demonstrated very well. It was one of my relatives. She has a wedding, and during that wedding, uh, the friend of my grandmother, she came to greet bride and the groom, and she started to sing a Kalmyk song, long song, which is uh, about farewell,
Hmm.
and it's in earlier days it was like a ritual song, and it was song so sad and words so sad that usually people were who heard that song, they all cried, and that song was intended to force the bride to cry because the bride, it's Rue de Passage for her, and she should symbolically die to be able to reborn as a new person
Hmm.
in a new family, in a new location. And that very old woman started to sing that song. I was amazed to listen it. Uh, I understood her because I already uh, got what about and what for what purposes is that song. But the bride and her friends, they started to laugh because it's just
Right.
silly, silly and something unclear and very funny for them. And they were laughing while that old lady sang that ritual songs. That lady were crying because she understood what for that song should be performed. But the younger, even bride, they were laughing. So it was very, it demonstrates very well how big is the gap
Hmm.
between different generations.
I see. Yeah, and I think that's like a very important point to make. No, there's like a very strong gap not even across generations, but even across generations of like I guess like even among like the people who live currently, for example, in Elista, and like who come from different backgrounds in Elista even. So I guess like so you raised an interesting question, like an interesting follow-up question. Maybe it's not too maybe weird, but like for a little bit of context, like some of the more, I guess, popular electronic musics in Latin America are some combination of, more electronic beats with, say, native chants. So I can think of like many, artists who do this type of like things, and I kind of like wanted to ask, have you seen music influenced by Kalmyk traditional music in kind of like the same way, in the same way that it's kind of like adopted into
Yeah,
maybe new trends?
yeah. If you're asking me about popular ethnic music, it's the same. It's the same. It's beat, it's Western harmonies, and a very universal rules how to create such music, which is very, how to say, it's modern, but that kind of music will not live long. And that music maybe had some exotic uh, features, and it's in Kalmyk, and it could be some additional like overtone singing and timbre of national instruments. But in terms of aesthetics is popular uh, Western music, and there are a lot of such music everywhere in China, in Mongolia, in Kalmykia as well.
Hmm. Okay. Yes. So I guess now in kind of like talking more about the youth currently in Kalmyk, in the Kalmyk Republic, I guess, yeah, what is the um how should I say this? What is more of like the typical maybe thoughts, or maybe the typical like problems that people of like different backgrounds, for example, face in Elista? Or is there like still quite a lot of hints of like or quite a lot of like divide between let's say ethnic Russians and ethnic Kalmyks that create some tension? Or what are like the issues that someone growing up in Elista would face on a day-to-day basis?
Когда я была школьницей, буду
Yeah.
говорить по-русски, это более простые сейчас будут предложения.
Mm.
Когда я училась в школе, в моей молодости, в Элисте, были советское время. Вся молодежь, почти вся молодежь, кроме отдельных очень э, хороших детей,
Mhm.
они почти все, особенно мальчики, участвовали в бандах. То есть это такая реальность, которая, может быть, мало известна, потому что вот так вот ностальгирующие люди считают, что при советском времени было все очень хорошо. Но я могу сказать, что в моей молодости, это как раз был уже конец советского времени, почти вся калмыцкая молодежь участвовала в бандах. Почти все мальчики состояли в той или иной банде.
Mhm.
То есть это была такая очень, очень криминализованная ситуация. И вообще-то, мне кажется, она была вообще типична для такого позднего советского времени. И там происходило очень много между ними драк. They were fighting.
Mhm.
And especially big fights were between uh, gangs with Russian or Slavic people in Kalmyk. So it was very typical to have fights between gangs on national, on ethnical,
Mhm.
uh, yeah, reasons. Сейчас Я просто хочу такие очень показать очень какие-то разные ситуации. А сейчас Калмыкия, Калмыцкая республика, она сейчас находится по экономическому развитию, вот по последним статистическим данным, она заняла самое последнее место среди всех э, республик и областей России по уровню жизни. То есть Калмыкия– это самый-самый бедный регион России.
Мгм.
И экономическое положение в Калмыкии ужасающее, экологическая ситуация ужасающая, потому что те хозяйства, которые составляли экономическую основу при советской власти, колхозы, животноводческие, скотоводческие, они все практически были разорены, и экономической основой, связанной с сельским хозяйством, животноводством, она почти разрушена, а какой-то новой промышленной инфраструктуры за время после перестройки не было создано. И Калмыцкая республика находится в ужасающем бедственном экономическом положении. И положение ее настолько ужасно, что почти все работоспособное население уезжает на заработки. So it's labor migration. It could be migration for 6 months or completely families just flew for big cities to find jobs. И потому как экономически республика очень слаба, соответственно, очень слаба и всяческая общественная жизнь республики. И последние большие скандалы в Калмыкии были связаны с административным назначением главы республики. Потому что сначала был упразднен, отменен статус президента Калмыкии,
Мгм.
после этого ввели должность глава республики. I don't know, head of republic, how to translate it better.
Мгм.
Глава республики. И, по сути дела, эти должности стали административно назначаться из Москвы. И, например, из Москвы был назначен мэром Элисты человек с криминальным прошлым из печально известной Донецкой этой республики, ДНР. Do you understand what means DNR?
No, I don't think so.
It's that fake um, fake republic which was established at the southern part of Ukraine when in 2015 that several regions was annexed by Russia.
Мгм.
И там были созданы такие непонятные какие-то администрации, но это республики, которые не признаны международным сообществом. И вот один из криминальных деятелей, который был руководителем Донецкой Народной Республики, позже был назначен мэром города Элисты. И калмыки восприняли это как невероятное оскорбление. И это, может быть, были последние массовые протесты против назначения этого человека. Протесты, не знаю, привели ли они к тому, что через несколько лет он уехал, он оставил свой пост. Но вот сейчас на пост главы республики назначен человек, который имеет калмыцкие корни, но он тоже связан с путинским окружением, он не имеет авторитета в республике, но он проводит исключительно путинскую политику, подавляя всевозможные протесты.
Ah, wow. Hello. Hello again.
Я, да. То есть говорить о каком-то общественном, сознательном движении в Калмыкии сейчас совершенно невозможно. И нынешний глава республики Бату Хасиков э, фигура абсолютно неуважаемая. Он был спортсмен, у него нет ни политического, ни экономического образования, никакого опыта для того, чтобы быть главой республики. И при нем республика еще более погружается вот в какой-то хаос и в абсолютную такую экономическую, какую-то безоглядную нищету. И вот что произошло дальше с калмыцким языком. Да, э, если вы помните, я, может быть, не буду повторяться о том, что в 2015 году Дума приняла закон о том, что изучение калмыцкого языка не обязательное.
Mm,
И поэтому многие семьи отказываются записывать своего ребенка для этих классов по калмыцкому языку, потому что им легче. Им легче. Они сами не говорят по-калмыцки, они не хотят тратить время на то, чтобы учить с ребенком калмыцкий язык, который они сами не выбирают. И когда они приходят, там есть теперь такое правило. Если они отказываются от выбора калмыцкого языка как родного, тогда они должны написать «мой родной язык русский». Тогда они начинают изучать русский язык и сопутствующие предметы по русской культуре.
mhm.
Например, Russian Orthodox Church doctrine, which
Okay.
is absolutely weird because Kalmyk are Buddhists, and it it's traditionally um, wasn't applied for the Kalmyk life, but because of that very weird law, that people, parents who decided that they pick up Russian culture instead of Kalmyk,
Mm,
their kids uh, study not only Russian language more, but Russian um, uh, Orthodox Christian culture.
mm. The customs and all of this is starting to become more orthodox than Buddhist, you would say.
Uh, Kalmyki, Kalmyks from the beginning of the statehood, they were Buddhists,
Yes.
and it's very strong basic for foundation for the Kalmyk ethnicity. And it just to show how unbelievably silly are the process
Mm,
which are now in schools in Kalmykia. And that civil organizations, or informal or just voluntary organization who would like to support and to teach Kalmyk language, they are absolutely without support, mostly without support. So it's just like civil movement
mm.
right now.
Okay. Now it's like the actual harder questions, I think. But Yeah, so you mentioned a little bit about like the political influences and kind of like how culturally the kind of like the Russian Orthodox way of life is starting to dominate a little bit more in the cities in Kalmyk in general, in Kalmykia in general. But I guess I want to ask more or less like do you find that most of the efforts to conserve the language, to conserve the culture, or most of the interest, most of the support really is found outside of Russia? For example, like you mentioned, there's a lot of interest in the States from the diaspora in this area to like learn about the conversational comic, for example.
А, Давайте немножко сразу уточним. По поводу Русской Православной Церкви, Russian Orthodox Church.
Mhm.
It couldn't be big impact and influence because it's not traditionally accepted by Kalmyk, and Kalmyks average Kalmyk, they are very far from the Russian Orthodox culture and churches. It's just weird that it became the subject, and it's forced to learn subject which is absolutely not of the interest. It's mostly about how silly all that funds and efforts and time of students and teachers just are waste. Потому что изучение все равно православной культуры, христианской, оно становится формальным заполнением необходимых часов, потому что иногда доходит до такого абсурда, что этот предмет русская православная культура начинают вести учителя калмыцкого языка. Потому что больше некому вести, а им нужны набрать часы. Это просто абсурдная ситуация. Нет, это не приведет к насаждению православной церкви, потому что калмыки неистребимо сильна в них уважение и привязанность к буддизму. Нет, это вот просто факт очень глупой, непонятно для чего организованной системы, которая реальных плодов не приведет, она только тратит ресурсы времени и там оплаты учителей и времени детей. Вот. Я хочу сказать, что the main interest grew up in Kalmykia. Конечно, основной интерес, он все-таки в Калмыкии, и это очень важно, потому что только в Калмыкии есть люди, которые хорошо говорят на калмыцком, как на родном языке, которые хорошо знают культуру калмыцкую, которые хотят, чувствуя потребность молодых, поделиться им. И that project which we intended to do, of course, is related to the people from Elista, from Kalmykia, who would like to share, who are helping us. Because here we have generations of first coming Kalmyk, it's Kalmyk American diaspora, mostly in Philadelphia, in New Jersey. Their first and even second generation, so there are mostly people who are about 70. They are speaks Kalmyk, but they grew up here. Their mentality is very American. And the source to learn to study Kalmyk culture and to study and revitalize the language is sure Kalmyk Republic and Elista.
Okay. Yes. So now here I want to make some kind of like parallels that I found learning about Kalmyk and the region and about the language that are common with much of Latin America. So here I want to bring to the attention two different languages, and the way they have been studied is very different. So first of all is one of the traditional languages or one of the indigenous languages of Mexico, Nahuatl, which has been studied, I think, to a lesser extent. I think it's been less successful overall with how it's been conserved, but there has been some conservation of it. Mostly it's studied as an academic subject in university, and it's not very widespread. No, it's maybe like out of total, including native speakers, there is like maybe 1 million total speakers of the language in a country of 120 million people, which is not a lot. By contrast, we also have one of the native languages of South America, Guarani, which is native to Paraguay. And I think like learning about Guarani, there seems to be a lot of resources to learn from it. So not only is it taught in schools pretty much throughout all of the basic schooling system to every a young person from Paraguay, like not even, it doesn't even matter if they're of native ethnicity or of completely European ethnicity, they all like learn of it independently. To the point where it's kind of like akin to how many Americans here learn Spanish, in the sense that it's probably not the best way to learn a language if you want to speak it well, but at least you have some notion of it, some mastery of it, even if minimal. And then of course there's a lot of I think because of this it's also been Guarani has also been a language that's been more adopted in many I guess like new ways of learning language. For example, the way I am learning it is through Duolingo, the app. And yeah, I was wondering like what parallels can we do with the Kalmyk language in ways that we can conserve it? Is it more similar, for example, in the way of Nahuatl, in the sense that it's only studied in an academic context? And what effect could it be such that both Nahuatl and Kalmyk, we learn more the way Guarani is learned, and it's more widespread. And in this way that it sort of like naturally progresses into be more adopted by just by the amount of people that speak it.
Okay, before that, can I just um, um, can you just repeat the language name Navajo?
Nahuatl,
Navajo?
Nahuatl,
Nahuatl.
yes,
Nahuatl. So it's one of the indigenous languages of Mexico.
yes. It's the most widespread language, indigenous language of Mexico, and with about only 1 million people speaking it, mostly Mexicans who are studying it, and maybe some people abroad. And then the other one is Guarani, which is from Paraguay. Uh,
Can you repeat it? Vanani?
Guarani, Guarani.
Vanani. Mhm.
Yeah, and it's from Paraguay, and Paraguay, of course, a much smaller country, but about 3 million people speak it. So speak it fluently, so like everyone learns it. 3 million people speak it, which is much more. It's by far the most spoken native language in all of America.
Mhm. My question is, can you say that Paraguayan people, they're bilingual?
I think with some difficulty. I would say this is why I make it's similar to how people in the United States learn Spanish, in the sense that they will, for example, in the States, people will learn Spanish. They will learn how to say some basic phrases. But I wouldn't say they are bilingual. They don't have mastery of the language. And I think it's very similar to the Spanish and to Guarani in Paraguay.
Mhm.
So I think it's like a similar
So
situation. They have some phrases, they know some words, they can say a couple of things, but with difficulty.
in Paraguay, Vanani is like uh, state language,
I think it's
or
recognized as a state language, yeah.
but they have both languages, Spanish and Vanani as Paraguayan languages.
Yes, yes, yes.
So that you may say that it's bilingual country.
Yeah, I think so. Let me actually just look it up right now. I think it's the case, but I think they do have two official languages. Um, let's see. Official languages, yeah, they have two official languages. Um, but to be honest, that really doesn't say much because Mexico, for example, has like 50 different official languages of which only Spanish is spoken. So yeah, but yeah, Paraguay does have Spanish and Guarani as the official languages.
Yeah, um, I think that situation with the languages, we had a discussion recently when we have a big ethnicity and minority ethnicity, and if the language of bigger ethnic group replace the minority group, is it natural process on
Mm,
can we name it as natural process? And after that discussion, I'm thinking more that uh, it's not a natural process, it's political process.
mm,
Because in many countries, people very happily live as mm, bilingual or even with three languages. For instance, we had situation right now with Mr. C. It's completely devastated, and I don't know what will be next. But at least several hundred years before, in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous District, Oirat Oirat, it's a relative group of Kalmyks, especially, I mean, that group who escaped Russia in 18th century. The half of Kalmyk escaped Russia. It was very complicated political situation, and they settled in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And since that time till recent, they speak they spoke three languages: their native Oirat or Oirat Kalmyk, Uyghur, and Chinese. In addition to that, they were able to write in Chinese. Will all that system. They were able to read and write in their classical Oirat script.
Mm.
And as about Uyghur, it was mostly spoken language,
Hmm.
but it was very happy situation for people with three languages. So, and I guess there are two bigger forces which can affect language. It's a political decision, the intention of government to do or not to do something, to support or repress something. And second one, it's ethnical self-identification. So, and if you will have time to see that Wikitank site, I personally was very excited to read stories of that people. And I guess it's the movement which started maybe 30, 40 years ago, when many people from different cultures, they realize that it's absolutely okay, it's normal, it's comfortable to live knowing at least two languages. And they started their movement encouraging uh, activists from different ethnic groups to support their languages. And you are right. If it's even not a fully speaking language, but as I say for myself, if at least you can sing that song, you understand that song, you
Hmm.
understand the context of that song, you can greet someone in your native language, you can make a very simple conversation in your own native language with another person. It's already a big step,
Hmm.
and maybe it's not a huge goal which can transform everything, but it's very meaningful things to do. And there is our very practical goal for the nearest years.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, I think this has been a very instructive discussion. I have learned a ton, a ton, a ton, a ton. Um,
No, I didn't realize earlier, but last years I believe more and more that the situation with languages uh, affected with political uh, political decision, and maybe it's very convenient for big countries, for the empires, for totalitarian society to unify everything.
yeah,
But I guess if we will save different languages, every language is unique because it's different view. We have
exactly.
yeah, we greet each other, but every language make it a different way. And
Yes.
even greeting can tell us more about that culture and psychological issues of that mentality. So I hope that maybe it will be a very influential movement, and maybe more people will like to learn more languages because it just make their lives richer and not. Uh, I just don't want to be very in very unified society because it's very boring and it's easily,
Mhm.
yeah, to be influenced with some, yeah, political doctrines.
Yes, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, without further ado, I would like to thank you very much for your time. This has been a conversation that I wish could last for many, many hours. Unfortunately, there I do have to work.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, this has been wonderful. I will definitely try to keep in contact. And
thank you.
well, yeah, would love to. I mean, this is for a project, but I would, of course, I would love to afterwards to just like continue talking about this, of course.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your interest. Can you just remind me your specialty, your specialization, your profession?
Yeah, so normally I study aerospace engineering. I'm a
Oh,
robotics, aerospace engineering and robotics. But like this love for learning languages, this love for like learning about cultures has just like been always around. And of course, when I came to MIT and I knew there was like this cool new language that I could learn in Russian, and I was like, oh wow, super! I'm gonna take Russian as as something that I do, you know, mostly for fun, mostly for you know, just for learning about the culture as well. And so yeah, I think like yeah, with every language, like it's kind of like the similar, no, like it's right now I like live in a very international house, so like there's a lot of friends who speak Arabic, a lot of friends who uh yeah, I guess mostly Arabic at this point, and a lot of other people from like Spanish speaking countries. But yeah, it's like a very nice like melting pot of culture, so yeah, I just really enjoy it.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We'll be in touch. If something significant in our Kalmyk projects, I'll let you know. Maybe it will be of interest for
of
you.
course. Yeah, thank you very much. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.